What's going on, everybody? How's everybody doing out there tonight? Hope everybody's doing okay out there. How's the weather? Hope it's been a beautiful day here in Georgia. Been a beautiful weekend, like just a glorious weekend here in the Fountain City. It's been great. Like couldn't have asked for a better day than what we've had here today. Been outstanding. Um, did anybody watch Will Smith slap Chris Chris Rock? It's all over Twitter. Um, yeah, my mom literally just came in here and told me about it. So um, yeah, that's crazy. Um, this week on Wrestling Quick Takes is going to be a little bit different. Um, how many of you guys out there love video games? I mean, if you love video games, then let me know in the chat. Um, how many of you grew up playing wrestling games? I know I did. So yeah. This week on Wrestling Quick Takes is gonna be about best wrestling games ever. Like I'm sure most of you um, grew up playing wrestling games as a kid, as a young adult. I know I did. I personally grew up playing the likes of oh WrestleMania, the arcade game. By the way, when WrestleMania, the arcade game came out, I would have turned 5 years old that summer. So yeah, um, I personally enjoyed it, and in your house was the same way. It was basically the same as WrestleMania, the arcade game. I mean, same graphics, same engine, um, same same control system, everything. You know what I mean? However, however, WWF in your house only came out for I do believe it was PlayStation 1. I mean, it was exclusive. Like you weren't gonna find it anywhere else. Only on PlayStation. So yeah, that was that was pretty fun. Um, with that, I guess I'll go on and get started. Best wrestling games ever. My notes right here in my hand. I am a wrestling game fanatic and I love to play no matter what system or time period. I love playing the PS1 and N64 titles as well as the Dreamcast titles. As a kid, I'll always remember playing SmackDown 1 and 2, and it just gave me a fun feeling ever since I am currently in the process of finding a PS2 because I have a couple of PS1 games I'd like to play. This week on Wrestling Quick Takes, I will be talking about some of the best wrestling games ever. So let's do it. Number one, WWF No Mercy for the N64. The year was 2000. The WWE was riding at an all time high, and the pace of the sports entertainment landscape was leaning in WWE's favor. Not only were they dominating in terms of popularity, but the WWE had already built a dominance when it came to the video game scene prior to the year 2000. Games like 1998's Warzone and 1999's Attitude was a testament to the success of the WWE video game franchise. But in 2000, the WWE took it to another level when No Mercy hit shelves. Some people some people think it's the best wrestling game ever, and now when I think about it, I can't disagree. According to DinofGeek.com, nearly 2 decades later, there still hasn't been a wrestling game that tops No Mercy. AKA was at the top of his game here, crafting a perfectly paced and accessible game with depth that fans are still mastering. Seriously, there are tons of mods out there for gamers looking to include current WWE and NXT superstars on the roster. But even without those mods, No Mercy remains infinitely replayable, infinitely replayable. With a huge roster, tons of match types, and the deepest creative wrestler mode ever made. I remember Ring No Mercy one time for the N64, and I was just blown away at just how good it looked. You know what I mean? Creative wrestler aside, I mean, the roster at that time period was loaded. I mean, you had Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, Taker, Mankind, The Big Show, Chris Jericho, who had made his debut the year prior. I mean, you had it all. I mean, it was great. It was great. Loved every bit of it. It was great. I could talk for hours about how good No Mercy was. Number two, WCW NWO Revenge for the N64. We're sticking with the N64. This title takes us back to the year 1998, and the video game wars was heating up between the N64 and the PlayStation. The wrestling game picture was only getting stronger with not only WWE Warzone, but WCW NWO Revenge also hit shelves that exact same year. Revenge brought us all something different, but it's hard to believe that it's been over 20 years since its release. It's hard to believe, but there was a time in the 90s when WCW nearly put the WWF out of business. Part of the reason for that was the incredibly popular New World Order storylines, but even outside the NWO, Ted Turner and Eric Bischoff had put together one of the most incredible rosters in wrestling history, including Diamond Dallas Page, Chris Jericho, Goldberg, Raven, and the Giant, better known now as the Big Show. Of course, we all know how things ended up for WCW, but Revenge remains a wonderful playable glimpse of the rival that nearly destroyed Vince McMahon's empire. So yeah, Revenge was another one. You had, I believe, Nitro and Thunder came out the same year in 1998, and it was those two titles of Nitro and Thunder were awful. I mean, you two of the worst wrestling games ever. I mean, there was no effort, there was no forward movement, there was no direction, there was no nothing put into those two games. And yeah, Revenge though was badass. I ain't gonna lie to you. I remember playing that and I was just blown away. I mean, how you could get weapons from the crowd and knock your opponent out cold, bust them open. I mean, Revenge took it to a whole nother level. And I'm thrilled, even to this day, I was thrilled to play it. Very thrilled to play it. Number three, WWF Smackdown 2 for the PlayStation. The SmackDown series the SmackDown series made its debut in March of 2000 with the first installment called WWF Smackdown for the PlayStation. It drew rave reviews and it brought an arcade style gameplay system that focuses on striking and grappling. They made it simple. The graphic for its time was pretty cool, and these same graphics would continue into the decade, which would lead us to WWF SmackDown 2 Know Your Role. The second installment of the series came out in November of 2000 and brought a faster style of gameplay, but the engine was the same as the first, but quicker. While N64 wrestling games stro- while N64 game while N64 wrestling games strove for realism, PlayStation WWF games were just about having a good time. SmackDown 2 featured featured heavy gameplay and emphasized multiple finishers to your opponents anyway. These matches might not look anything like what the WWF put on TV every week, but damn it, if they weren't fun, the graphics are pretty dated now, as pretty much all PS1 games are, but it's still easy to see from this early title while the SmackDown games had such a successful tenure. So yeah, I actually have SmackDown 2 back there. I actually have both the SmackDowns for PlayStation 1 and 2, and I played them both and I'm impressed. I mean, SmackDown 2 was really it was the same as 1, but it was quicker, but if you notice, it gave us a more enhanced roster and the create a wrestler was more expansive and it gave us more. So, I mean, when you put two and two together, you really make for a great game. And I'm thrilled to own both of those titles. The next one, WrestleMania 2000 for the N64. We come back to the year 1999 for this next title, and why not, right? I mean, the video game scene was hot. The PlayStation and N64 clearly had established themselves as the benchmark of the gaming world, not to mention that the Sega Dreamcast had been born, but it didn't get the recognition like the N64 and PlayStation did. The N64 had developed a legendary series of wrestling games. You had Warzone, Attitude, Mayhem, and Revenge, just to name a few. But as we come to the next century, we got another sequel in the name of WrestleMania 2000 that came out on the N64. Just a year, just a year after aka AKI brought the war between WCW and NWO to the N64, the studio released one of the best wrestling games ever made, using the same polygon figures as WCW NWO Revenge. WWF WrestleMania 2000 brings a huge roster of superstars, complete with interesting and unique animations to the 64-bit console, as well as all of the match types you'd ever want, and pay-per-views, including the biggest show in the wrestling business. But WrestleMania 2000 is more than just presentation and features. The game, the game boasts one of the best story modes ever made. So yeah, WrestleMania 2000. I mean, I would have turned like what 9 years old the year it came out that summer. But I remember just being in awe at how WrestleMania 2000 looked for the time period. I mean, you had better graphics, you had sleeker moveset, you had a creative wrestler, you had a story mode that is still being talked about to this day. And so for that, I put that in my, you know, on my list in terms of best wrestling games ever made. So yeah. SmackDown, Here Comes the Pain for the PS2. The 2000s signaled the next gen era, and it did not disappoint at all. The PS2 came out in the year 2000, which made the SmackDown series stronger than it's ever been. You had Just Bring It in 2001. You had Shut Your Mouth in 2002. But in 2003, the third installment of the series hit shelves, and it was the best of the best in the way of pain. SmackDown, Here Comes the Pain for the PS2. One common criticism of current WWE games is how they inflict arbitrary rules on the player in the name of realism, or 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 maintaining WWE's PG image. Older WWE games used to allow for intergender tag matches and had more options for hardcore options. They included stuff like inferno matches, where the goal was literally to get your opponent on fire. In there, in Here Comes the Pain, you could actually throw your opponent off a building, hitch a rod on a helicopter, and then perform an elbow drop off the helicopter. It's the type of ridiculousness that broken mo- it's the type of ridiculousness that broken Matt Hardy could only dream of, and easily makes this one of the best wrestling video games of all time. Yeah, so 2003 was pretty, I mean, 2003 was pretty strong when it came to like the WWE in general. I mean, the roster had grown. I mean, it had grown. I mean, 2002, I mean, that outstanding rookie class, which consisted of John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Batista, Randy Orton. I mean, they all went on to have very successful careers. But this game really exemplifies that. So if you haven't played Here Comes the Pain, I strongly recommend you go pick it up. You'll probably find it for a little next to nothing offline, online. But I really personally enjoy Here Comes the Pain. I mean, I was looking forward to jumping off the top of a helicopter and elbowing the hell out of somebody. I mean, somebody got their ass handed to them backstage because of all the different features that, I mean, you had. I mean, yeah, why not, right? The next title, WrestleMania, WWF WrestleMania, the arcade game for the Genesis, Super NES, 32-bit, and PlayStation. The early 90s gave us more quality games, and it ushered in the era of the 16-bit console. The vocal titles here were Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, which dominated the fighting game scene, was all that you played, or all that I played, really. But in 1995, that would all change in the way of WWF WrestleMania, the arcade game, which came out on multiple platforms. This 1995 classic has the feeling of Mortal Kombat with its combo and strike system. If you like button mashing, then there then this game is for you. Picture Mortal Kombat with the WWE license. That's basically WWF WrestleMania, the arcade game. The title features the same digitized graphics as the early Mortal Kombat games, but instead of bleeding, which would actually fit the game just fine, random, random objects associated with each wrestler fall out of them when they're hit. Bret Hart bleeds heart. Seriously? WWF WrestleMania is a rather goofy relic of the 90s that holds up remarkably. Just be warned that this was a period when the WWE roster was extremely lightly on talent. Legends like The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels are joined by questionable additions like Bam Bam Bigelow and Doink the Clown. Yeah, and pretty much, I mean, they left the so WrestleMania, the arcade game, they left out a lot. Like, it was a lot to be desired, but it was still a great game. I personally enjoyed it. Um, you left out Stone Cold Steve Austin, you left out Ahmed Johnson, you left out Warrior, you left there were a lot of guys that were supposed to be in WrestleMania, the arcade game, but didn't make the cut. I mean, also the fact that you had Razor Ramon and I do no, he was actually in the game, but Diesel wasn't. Why? I have no idea. But the digitized graphics are the same as Mortal Kombat. I mean, they are literally like it's no different. You know what I mean? So, I mean, yeah. All right. Our final title of this week's episode of Wrestling Quick Takes. Um, WWE Smackdown versus Raw 2011 came out on the PS3, PS2, PSP, Xbox 360, and the Wii. Our final title takes us back to 2010, the last installment of the SmackDown series. Around this time, the series had clearly established itself as the premier wrestling game franchise. The series grown over time, and there wasn't a wrestling game out there who could hold a candle to SmackDown. The final installment was called SmackDown vs. Raw 2011. That was released on multiple platforms in 2010. The final game in the long running SmackDown series is easily one of the best in the storied franchise, with new physics that make hardcore matches a lot more fun, even if they're not terribly realistic. This was also the first WWE title to feature a universe mode, which has become a staple of the games to this day. Although it does feel rather primitive here, but the biggest issue with the game is that it just feels like it's all been done before. which is not a huge surprise given that this is the 12th game to bear the SmackDown name. SmackDown versus Raw 2011 is still worth checking out if you've only played a handful of the games in the series, but most other fans have plenty of other favorites and ahead of it. Well, that's all for this week's show. And until next time, God bless. So, yeah, that basically sums up my list. I mean, I would like to know what you guys think. Like, what's the best wrestling game ever? What is your top 5 wrestling games ever? I mean, let me know down in the chat below. I mean, I would like to know. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So that's all for this week's episode, guys. I hope you found it informative. Now, I'm just gonna put this out there. This week there will not be an episode of Wrestling Quick Takes because I will be more than likely watching WrestleMania, and it's a loaded wrestling week. Of course, Raw tomorrow night. Of course, NXT on Tuesday. You have SmackDown on Friday, AEW on Wednesday. So, but and then of course SmackDown on Friday, but also the Hall of Fame is this upcoming Friday on SmackDown, and of course WrestleMania Saturday and Sunday. So, yeah. So, just warning you guys, there will not be a show this week, but the week after WrestleMania, I will be back on and we'll go from there. All right. So, that's it for me, guys. I hope you found it informative. Um, Stay safe out there wherever you are. And until next time, God bless and have a good night.